recommendation is give yourself plenty of time when you get started on this. It will always take longer than you think. When I first created my first portfolio, I thought, half an hour, no, I have all the material, it's just a matter of uploading and putting things here and there. And it ended up being like a 3-week project, just totally long. I mean, it involves so much more than I expected. And this is where I want to transition to Brad Neely. He will testify to that experience of putting together a portfolio, not with our own system, but at a system in the grad program that he's at. Do you want to be up here? Because
Sure,
we're in camera right now. So.
Let's see, it's still morning, so good morning, folks. Yes, and I want to express my appreciation to Mike here for inviting me to be part of his presentation today about e-portfolios. I'm in the Master of Science in Education Online Teaching and Learning grad program through CSU East Bay, and I've just gone through this process of developing, as part of a class project, focus was an e-portfolio. And to reinforce what Mike had talked about in terms of the different types of e-portfolios, the one that I think I most relate to was the learning e-portfolio. And like you said, you have the overview, you have the finished product that you usually will see once it's done. But I'm here to tell you more about what happens under the hood with developing an e-portfolio, at least in my experience, was as some of the points that Mike had made in terms of collecting your materials. And I think the first step was thinking about the audience. For myself, what I went into this with a fixed idea that who I actually wanted to demonstrate my learning to was not just my classmates, believe it or not, but also to the students that I serve in disability services, because I saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate and model concepts about accessibility. And so part of my own development was for example, we had a part of the e-portfolio project was to post our discussions of the learning assignments that we would have to do essays related to. So as part of that, though, I wanted to make sure that not only could somebody who didn't have vision issues, but somebody who did would still be able to access that content. So part of that was learning how to convert text into audio. And that goes back to then learning about using the various content creation tools. And in this case, I was able to use a program called Audacity. But I can tell you that one aspect of this, our goal was to create a one minute voice welcome page, welcome introduction. I discovered how difficult it was to create a 1 minute video, audio. It was, you have to get a practice session, you have to constantly try to whittle down what you're trying to say, and it did have an effect of making me very focused on what I had to do as a message. Now, the other part of this is, as you go along with developing the content, what became very clear to me after you collected your different images, your voice files, or what have you that you were going to be using on your e-portfolio, you needed to have what I call a content structure or framework within the e-portfolio itself. And I had to very consciously keep in mind that I was going to be using web links to these different content artifacts within the e-portfolio system. So that was something that I really needed to think about was, okay, I have documents, I have JPEGs, I have multimedia files, how to organize that in a structure that made sense logically, so that when I did link to it, I could readily say, okay, here's the path to that, and be able to upload it and have a scheme of work that made it easier to remember the structure overall of the e-portfolio underneath. So I can't emphasize enough the need to kind of reflect about how you're going to create those linkages and have a content framework, as I call it. The other aspect, and Mike said, it's very time. I cannot believe how much time it took me to create a 7-minute multimedia presentation with video and text and voice and so forth. It took me, I want to say, at least 24 hours. Not straight through, but you really had to work and make sure that the sound and the text came in as you were. So time is something you really can't underestimate the need to be able to dedicate to. Because sometimes what you discover is even in using these tools, one of the tools I used was Adobe Captivate, which was a great tool for converting PowerPoint presentations. And it had within it the ability to create quizzes. Great idea, right? But then you discover that it only allows you to ask one question per slide instead of having a traditional quiz with 5 questions or 10 questions on it. And you're going, wait a minute, this isn't useful like this. And then you end up getting out there and researching. That's the other aspect of this you have to make time for, is having the time to research and find out what the limitations are of these different tools that you have. And similarly, the limitations of the ePortfolio tool itself can come into play, because in the one that I use, which was through Blackboard's ePortfolio system, they had a visual editor, so you had to really work with the limitations of that particular system. So same thing I would imagine with the ePortfolio tool that Mike is more familiar with, that you have to learn the limitations of that. I got to the point where I actually had to use my HTML knowledge to get under the hood and actually code myself to be able to create the effects that I wanted to. So that was something that I was really amazed at, was how much time it did actually take. But once you have it, you have it. So it's that kind of thing. You put the investment in up front, but after you have it, it's done. And for me, it was a great learning experience in terms of the evolution of my learning. I could have, as I mentioned, the discussion posts where I'm being introduced to new concepts, I'm working with other students and having discussions online, and eventually all that interaction comes into play and manifests as part of the essay that I would basically write. And as you go through the course, as I did, we had about 6 different essays. You could actually see the evolution of your work and your thought and your thinking, which I thought was a great benefit, because in my mind also I was very well aware that as a professional development tool, I wanted to be able to show this to my supervisors and so forth and say, here's an example of how we can use ePortfolios to not only demonstrate the learning, but also how we can model different aspects of what we're doing in terms of accessibility and serving students with disabilities. So now, where I'm at with ePortfolios is really starting to look at how they could be used within disability services and what that would mean for student service delivery, for example. So I don't have too much else on this, but if you're welcome to ask me any questions later if you're in the middle of this.
And I'll put a link to his portfolio on our website too, so you can take a look at it later. But no, thank you, Brad. I think you captured well you highlight the importance of what I was going to ignore, which is the limitations of ePortfolios, because I think on the one hand it has a lot of promise, and I think definitely there's a lot of new territory that we have yet to explore. But with anything new, there's always the walls and limitations that we'll hit. So the major features of the ePortfolio tool that we have are the forms, which is if you think of any electronic forms you filled out online, when you buy something, you put in your name, the address, and so on. That's what it is. And the nice thing about these forms is you can attach it to the tool, and you can have guided response from your students. Let's say if you're interested in asking about certain information from your students, or if from right now I'm in the process of creating the teaching portfolio tool for the writing program. So we're interested in having the faculty give us certain information about their research expertise, about their teaching expertise, about certain information. Then forms are really great for that, because you can very focused collect those information, and students don't have to worry about that background HTML stuff that Brad was talking about. They just look at an electronic form, they fill it in, and they press submit, and then all that information goes into the system. Matrices, it's just a two-dimensional structure that kind of guides. It's a structure that guides the participants through that process, and I'll show you what it looks like. And the way it's set up, it's very easy. Just look at it, and when you have completed a particular cell in a matrix, you would see an icon, and you can actually turn on the little status function where if you completed that particular cell, it'll turn from green to red or something, and that means that you're done, or different color, or whatever you want to, as a way to show status. Templates, it just refers to layout of what your portfolio looks like. I don't want to kind of talk too much about this because this is probably the most technical piece of all of them, because it requires XML programming as well as HTML programming and CSS programming, and I've had to learn a lot of these just on the spot, and I'm still struggling with a lot of it. But I think we've been working with IT and with another company called Serensoft that's helping us with that aspect of it, and so hopefully by the time we can kind of release this publicly to everybody on campus, a lot of that programming will be under control and dealt with by the IT unit, or we'll outsource that somehow. And then the portfolio tool itself is just the publishing. It's where you assemble and you publish your portfolio. Just overview of the quick workflow. You set up a site. Anybody who wants to set up a portfolio site can. You just have to ask for permission from IT. Then you create a matrix, the forms, the templates. You structure the cells you want with instructions and forms. You populate it, and you construct it, and then you just share. So this is sort of the overview of the workflow. Let me show you a couple of examples of sort of, I guess, the first semester was fall was the first semester that we deployed. It was a pilot phase, and I used it in my Writing 117 class, which is the writing for social sciences and humanities. And I just have two examples to kind of show you. So this is from my student Selena, and she in our course. I wanted them to. I mean, this is sort of the traditional setup of what writing portfolios include. Like, it's typically an introduction. This is where it's sort of her cover letter to her portfolio. She talks about who she is, what the things she's learned, sort of the broad lessons and the broad issues that she had to encounter in the course. And then on the right you can see the little nice profile of the picture and some information, personal information about her. And then the structure of the portfolio is totally flexible. You can have any kind of links and menu you want. It's just it's a matter of you wanting just changing it kind of thing. And the final project is sort of where I asked my students to kind of include sample of the best papers you've written this semester, the best projects, the best things you've done, and put that here and write about it. Tell me why these are the best things you've done in this semester. And this is what this particular tab is about. And then the coursework is the things that sort of class participation. Sometimes it's very difficult to evaluate students on class participation. I mean, besides them showing up and speaking up, I mean, how else can you kind of evaluate? And so I've asked them to, in this particular section of the portfolio, to kind of show me, like, throughout the semester, what are the little things you've done that show that you were engaged, that you've done something beyond just showing up and speaking up, And so here, she included things like her class minutes. She took notes while she was in class. She included her first impression of the class that we were, or something. I mean, it was different projects that she included that demonstrated that she was engaged. The journal reflection is just, I asked them to keep journals throughout the semester of the reading and the things that they're doing, what they're learning, and so, and that's what this. And then the group work component is where I asked them to, on various projects, work with 2 or 3 other students throughout the semester to show that. And here are the sort of the products of the group work, and here is where she describes the lessons she's learned, or what role she played in the group, and how that has changed or helped her in her learning. And so, so that's an example of a student learning portfolio. Well, I probably don't need to show you another. It's essentially the same, it's just another student. Here's a link to my current teaching portfolio, which is incomplete. As you can see, it's not Latin. It's it's I just want to populate it just to show you what it can look like. So this one is sort of just a mock-up of what my teaching portfolio could look like. I have my personal information here, my teaching interests, my research interests, my educational degree, and these are the 3 sections I can have. There's sort of my professional development section, my curriculum, the things that I use in my classes, and the assessment. So, and here I just kind of include the artifacts and then the reflection of what I'm doing and how I'm engaging with the artifacts that I have. And it's, I would say that the final product is fairly simple to navigate. I mean, there's not much, we haven't gotten to a point where we start doing multimedia stuff like audio and video, but all that is possible, but it's the time issue. I just want, as we are piloting this, I want to make it as simple and as basic first to get everybody kind of on board just with the text. And then as people are more comfortable with the tool, then they can add audio, video, flash, whatever it is that they want to include in it. The nice feature about also this template is the artifacts that's attached, you can click on it and it will open it. So if it's a Word document, it will open the Word document. If it's a PDF, and this in particular is an image, so you can see more. And Dunya Ramakova, she's a professor in art, and she's using this for her art class, and you can see the relevance. A lot of the student work is digitized. They take pictures of it or they digitize it somehow, and they include that as artifacts, and you can see how they can pull up images at a time and look at the student work. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those her students' portfolio by the end of the semester and how those will turn out. So. There are tons of new opportunities with this new tool. For students, it could, I think, teach them about audience, about ethos, the presence of how they communicate their achievements, about what they're learning. They learn about outcomes, they learn about technology. I mean, you can't put together an e-portfolio without becoming more technologically adept at doing it, because it forces you to learn the stuff.